a lot of people felt that the kind of candidate that they would have wanted to run wasn't allowed to run. A lot of people were disqualified from even participating in the presidential election. And therefore, there's a lot of frustration. This was not an election where they could have their voices heard.
There are young people that want to render a homage to this girl that was raped and assassinated. They will not be able to do it because there is this Antifa organization that tries to prevent them from doing so.
I've come to the conclusion that trans ideology, when it's put into action, is arguably the most corrupting influence within European culture at the moment. It's the most corrosive one, because what it does is it basically dehumanizes the people that it entraps.
So hello and welcome back to the MCC Brussels Podcast. I'm Jacob Reynolds. This week on the podcast, we're going to take a look at Ireland, where there was a very important and interesting result in the presidential election. We're going to turn to France, where a vigil for a murdered young girl was attacked by Antifa. And we're going to look at Spain, where a supposedly trans-inclusive, trans-feminist summer camp has been mired in allegations of child abuse. Joining me this week on the podcast, delighted to welcome back our Executive Director, Frank Furedi.
Pleasure.
And really excited to welcome a new guest, Miguel Toledano, who works in the European Parliament with the Vox Group in the Patriots for Europe. Welcome.
Hello, Jacob. Hello, Frank.
Before we get into things today, I just want a little plea to our viewers. You might have noticed, but thanks to lots of new regulations brought in by the European Union, the reach of conservative, patriotic voices on social media is severely curtailed. So we're doing everything that we can to get our message out. But if you do like watching the podcast, please make sure you tune in. Make sure you leave us a comment, like, and spread the word. It's really, really important for us to be able to get the word out and to get round the blocking and bias and manipulation that the EU is forcing onto big tech. Turning now to Ireland, where there's a interesting result in the presidential election. Of course, on the left, the far left candidate won the election. It has been an interesting time with such a kind of divisive figure as the head of state in Ireland. But perhaps more interesting than the result was the kind of non-result of the election, the fact that there were so many spoiled ballots. And this really gives rise to a theme that we've wanted to analyze on the podcast many times before, the kind of curious lack of representative politics at the heart of Irish politics, where so many people believe that they have absolutely no voice. So, Frank, how did you interpret this election result?
I think it was very interesting in a number of respects. You mentioned the fact that it's a far-left candidate, but I think in the end she was the establishment's candidate, because the establishment itself in Ireland has become so woke that it's indistinguishable from what used to be called the far left. I think in that respect, it's a bit similar to Spain, where the government there too is like on the woke end of European politics. But I think what was interesting is that a lot of people felt that the kind of candidate that they would have wanted to run wasn't allowed to run. A lot of people were disqualified from even participating in the presidential election. And therefore, there's a lot of frustration on the part of people that this was not an election where they could have their voices heard, that there was no way that there was a candidate that they wanted to vote for running in the election. And therefore they did the obvious thing, which was to demonstrate their anger by spoiling their ballots. And the fact that so many people, I think it was around 200,000 people, more or less spoiled their ballots, which is quite a lot given the size of the Irish electorate, indicates that there's a profound sense of estrangement, alienation, right at the heart of Irish society. And I think that with that development, it's only a matter of time before a movement arises that is capable of mobilizing those voices and creating a political party that can perhaps shake things up a little bit within Irish politics.
And Miguel, it's actually a kind of a pattern we see in lots of European countries, but that we've seen in Ireland this time, of where the spoiled ballot, the empty ballot, would almost be the second largest party, or sometimes the largest party in many elections. Well, what do you make of this election result?
Yes, I very much agree with what Frank just said. I think we have to focus not only on the people that voted for Mrs. Connolly, but also the people that didn't vote for her. Yeah? According to the figures given by Mr. McQuirk, 70% of the electorate did not vote for the president-elect, which, of course, also poses some questions about the mandate she has and the potential dysfunctions of the electoral systems. In a certain way, I think, with all due respect for the Irish people who have been very brave, and I am sure that it is more the fault of the establishment than their own. In a certain way, they are following the path, if you wish, a little bit in a more in a slowly motion of what has happened in the UK before. Because in the UK before, people elected Labour because they were sick and bored of the Conservatives, basically because the Conservatives had abandoned their policy and were copying Labour, and they were becoming more left-wing woke. And only now that an alternative has surged with the Reform Party, are the people able really to choose someone that will represent them. Perhaps we have the same in Spain. We had the same situation in Spain before. We didn't have Vox at the time, and a lot of people were sick and tired of the Partido Popular. And of course, this is used by other parties, including the left-wing parties, to gain power. So it is very important that the normal people are given a chance to have a true representative.
And it's very important, Frank, because there's a tremendous amount of anger in Ireland, especially over the issue of asylum and the housing of asylum seekers kind of in small towns and villages all across the country. We saw this boil over after very recently with riots erupting in Ireland. So there's a lot of anger in Ireland.
Yeah, I think that there's one difference between England and England, which is that in Ireland, you've got all these parties like Sinn Féin, some of the left-wing parties that have historically had a close relationship with the electorate, and particularly with working people. And a lot of people, particularly in the countryside, almost naturally supported Sinn Féin, and they believed in Sinn Féin as being their party. And it's only gradually that they begin to realize that these parties have more or less betrayed what they stood for. I mean, people are still not able to comprehend the fact that these natural parties, which have been around in Ireland for a long time, are no longer the parties that their parents and their grandparents supported, but they become very, very different. And that's why you'll find that unlike in many other parts of Europe, in Ireland, the dissident, potentially more populist parties are really, really small and are divided amongst themselves. It's only now that they're gradually emerging and having a bit more of a profile. So we have a bit of a way to go. But I'm convinced that it's only a matter of time before the demand for a new alternative is going to crystallize into the creation of a new movement in Ireland itself. And I just hope that these different dissident parties that are around can unite together and begin to form some kind of a credible alternative.
Yeah, Miguel, Ireland's been in many cases a kind of poster child of policies promoted by the European elite, and not just in economic issues, but on the woke issues we talked. So as we see European politics shift away from those policies, and people become disillusioned with them, Ireland is ripe, as it were, for a political revolution.
Yes, that's right. I mean, again, taking on what Frank just said, the new alternative that hopefully Irish voters are going to be offered will not only attract them because of public order matters like illegal immigration, like crime, but also it will offer, particularly the younger generations, a moral recovery of a country. I think that there is now, the president-elect is someone who was raised a Catholic, but has become pro-abortion, pro-euthanasia, very woke. And she has expressed, described herself as irreligious now. She is a socialist. I think that the youth and the Irish, they deserve better than that. And hopefully a new alternative will come, which will offer and present not only public order control, but at the same time reinvigoration of Irish traditional values, which are appealing so much to the younger generations worldwide.
I mean, you have to remember that Ireland is a very funny country because it's the most Americanized country in the EU. It's more or less run by the Democratic Party from Chicago in the United States. And at the same time, it's the most craven nation in relation to the European Union. It's kind of really benefited from the European Union. So there's been a symbiotic relationship. And this has come on the back of the fact that in Ireland, traditional values, which were represented by the Catholic Church, unraveled very, very fast. I mean, faster than in Spain. And therefore, you have a situation where traditional values are held by a smaller number of people today in Ireland than any other time. And therefore, there's a big job in Ireland because you got to, number one, get rid of the American influence over Ireland culturally. And you also have to loosen yourself from the hold of the European Commission. It's a big job, but I'm convinced that the Irish people have got to fight in them to do the business. But it is going to be very difficult because of the historical circumstances that have trapped Ireland in this woke kind of trap altogether.
So coming to a really important topic, we wanted to lead with it, even though it's not exactly been international news. There's a really shocking case in Nantes in France where some young patriotic students led a vigil after the conviction of an awful case involving a young girl, 12-year-old girl, who was murdered by an Algerian woman in really, really horrific circumstances. These young people led a vigil through the streets, which was incredibly attacked by Antifa. And there are videos circulating, which we'll put in the comments of what went on. But this is really quite an appalling case, Miguel, not just the murder itself, but the fact that even to speak about or draw attention to this crime and to pay tribute to the victim is considered a provocation by Antifa.
Yes, very much indeed. The problem here is that these people, they try and to some extent manage to portray what is a crime and what is their intention to cover up a horrible crime to this beautiful girl, young lady, Lola, 12 years old, as an exercise of virtue. And this is the world upside down. The underlying problem is a bit more sophisticated because virtue can be as classically portrayed as the exercise of reason, Aristotle or Aquinas, but it could also be portrayed, as was the case with Robespierre, as something that you have to impose with terror. And this Antifa people, as a matter of fact, some of them might believe that they are exercising virtue because they are using terror to impose their views. And when there are young people that want to render a homage to this girl that was raped and assassinated, they will not be able to do it because there is this Antifa organization that tries to prevent them from doing so.
And Frank, we've seen Antifa trying to, in Brussels, disrupt the ability of people to hold meetings and things, but this is a new low, or even by Antifa's standards.
We have to remember that, as Miguel was implying, there is a strange kind of cosmic outlook here because in their eyes, this young girl wasn't raped, wasn't murdered. It wasn't a crime. Yeah, what is a crime is to memorialize her victimization and to draw attention to the fact that this is a horror that should not have happened. So in their eyes, there's almost like a moral reversal between good and evil. And it really reminds me a little bit. I think what we have here is not unlike what happened in the reaction to October the 7th, where to this day they don't see rape, they don't see women being violated, they don't see children being killed and taken hostage. They see a positive, heroic act. And the people that criticize it, that memorialize it, are the ones that are evil in their eyes. So there's a complete moral reversal that they take part in. And I think what that means is that from the standpoint of the Antifa, they're so morally corrupt. There's so much living in a different moral world than the rest of us, that they can dehumanize people, they can terrorize people, all in the name of their cause. And people don't really understand how dangerous this is, because Antifa hasn't got the power yet that terrorist or totalitarian organizations had in the past. But if they're allowed to continue in this way, and if people don't stop them and kind of bear down upon it, I think that our domestic life internally is going to be put under severe threat.
And Miguel, obviously the key fact here is that the murderer in this case was Algerian. And that's the fact that is not allowed to be spoken in public. And that's why Antifa are so determined to even not allow the victim to be properly remembered.
That's right. There is a problem of speech here. Yeah, there is a problem of speech because you have on one side the association that was organizing the homage is not to be neglected. It is the Youth University Association of the Rassemblement National. It is the party with the highest electoral representation in France. On the other side, you have a bunch of criminals because what they are doing is a crime. They are launching tear gas. They are throwing bottles. They are blocking violently and using intimidation a properly organized homage. And they are doing it not to anyone in particular, but to a very important association of students. So in actual fact, there is a clear blockage of speech. This is very dangerous, as Frank said before. And it shows also a certain, I would say, negligence on behalf of the French state. Because tolerating this to happen shows a profound lack of the French state. The French state is letting this criminal organization, terrorist, because as I said before, using the words of Robespierre, they are imposing terror. They are allowing this organization to occupy the public space to the detriment of those that only want to pray on the street, to put candles on a murdered 12-year-old.
And nonetheless, Frank, is also important in this case. We recognize the students themselves who organized this demonstration in France. Firstly, I mean, they held off and held their own against the attacks of Antifa. But it's also a positive step that after being so long on the defensive, young conservative people feel that they can begin to organize in this kind of an open fashion in the streets as well.
Well, I think it's very important that we don't just give over the streets to the Antifa thugs, because if we evacuate the public space and play it very safe and don't stand up and be counted, then I think we become accomplices in creating problems for the whole of society, because basically that legitimates that physical power has the last word in a democracy. So I think what the kids did in Nantes is really, really good. I was very glad, as you say, that didn't just run away, as is the case sometimes, but they kind of remained there, because I think it sets an example of what we should do and also what to expect. Because I know, for example, even here in Brussels, because of the fact that Antifa has threatened us time and time again, we've decided that we're not going to disappear. We're not going to play it safe by not having a public profile, because we feel that the only way that you can deal with this kind of a threat is by countering it by your courage. And I think that courage has become a virtue that is more important now than ever before in public life, because unless people stand up and demonstrate that if they will fight for the democratic rights, we're going to be in big trouble, in big danger. I should mention one thing, which is that in Britain, we have many examples where you have sort of asylum seekers or illegal immigrants being complicit in a variety of different crimes. And there's a continuous attempt to hush it up as if it just didn't exist. So I think that's what's important there, because if this woman hadn't been Algerian who murdered this young girl, then there wouldn't have been a reaction by Antifa. If a French person had done that, a white French person, there wouldn't be no Antifa reaction. It's only when their people, their favorite victim, sort of identity is under threat, that they react in this way.
Well, I think that that point is very important. I would like to add a couple of items to that. Indeed, what the Antifa tried to hide is that the culprit of this horrible crime was a woman, first of all, and she was from Algeria. She is from Algeria. And now there is a life sentence. She needs to spend the rest of her life in jail. She had alleged accomplices too, who were not condemned, but there were people that potentially were trying to hide her and support her. And there were also women there, and there were also people from Algeria there. So this is really what is a problem for the Antifa. Another item that perhaps needs to be also stressed here is that before the homage took place, the youth organization was attending a conference which was given by a French intellectual. And this man has problems to give lectures, has to hide, has to choose a secret place, because otherwise he might be attacked, he might not be allowed to deliver the conference. So all of this shows that there is a lot of power and crime on one side, and the other side is simply trying to exercise freedom of speech and also some kind of piety for a horrible crime.
Yeah, well, congratulations to the young youth of, as you mentioned, of the Rassemblement National Foundation, but also the Cocard d'Etudiants, who were deeply involved, and we give our support and our solidarity to them, and may they long continue. Finally, this week, wanted to take advantage of the fact that we got Miguel on with us to take a look at a really appalling, but even if quite small, but very appalling but revealing story that has come out of Spain in the last few weeks, which is allegations of really horrible child abuse at a pro-trans, pro-feminist summer camp organized in the Basque Country in Spain. Miguel, what's the kind of scandal that's emerged over this? And then we'll dig into it.
That's right. So we have this summer camp in the Basque Country in the north of Spain, and the scandal breaks up because we know that there were trainers which were cooking in front of children, wearing nothing but an apron, or engaging in sexual activity in front of young teens. And this was described as trans-feminism or as inclusivity. Of course, the man on the street knows better than that. And despite all the propaganda, this broke out as really a case of scandalous child abuse tolerated by the Basque authorities.
Yeah, and Frank, it demonstrates that there's a thin line, and it seems an increasingly thin line between the kind of celebration and a promotion of trans identity and certain radical feminist things, and the eroding the line between adults and children and the sexualization of children.
Yes, I think the one thing that often not realized is that trans culture is devoted towards, in a sense, treating children like adults and treating adults like children. It's an interesting reversal, because if you look at a lot of the trans activists, they behave like children. They kind of, dress up in a weird kind of a way, and they behave as if they're 9-year-old. And at the same time, they sexualize young kids as young as 7 or 8, and try to educate them into their values at a very, very early age. And that's encouraged by certain schools, because they think that that's, as Miguel was saying, being very inclusive. We're open to everything. And I think that I've come to the conclusion that trans ideology, when it's put into action, is arguably the most corrupting influence within European culture at the moment. It's the most corrosive one, because what it does is it basically dehumanizes the people that it entraps, because the people that it entraps become essentially no longer what they were meant to be. Their kind of their behavior and their manner and their very biology, which dictates that they become a certain sex, suddenly becomes kind of corrupted. And therefore, once you do that, then anything goes. So therefore, I'm not really surprised by this kind of dissolute behavior that takes place, because I think that is intrinsic. It's the logic of that ideology. It isn't just something that happens accidentally. This kind of thinking, this kind of culture, this kind of sexualization of young children at an early age invariably leads towards this kind of disgusting, corrupt behavior.
Yeah, Miguel, it's worth taking a moment to just kind of think about how shocking this scandal is, because people think about the Basque Country, they think of the traditional heartland of Spain, you think of the power of tradition, and for these kind of organizations to be given effectively free reign over children, even in a remote Basque village, is kind of remarkable.
But that's right, and there is a certain parallel with what we spoke a minute ago about Ireland. Ireland used to be a country with traditional values, and the Basque Country indeed was a very traditional region in Spain, if not the most traditional region in Spain. But once you corrupt the values, then what was perhaps best before turns worst. So to some extent, it does not come as a surprise that this kind of horrible things happen nowadays in the Basque Country. Let us not forget also there is another parallel with Ireland. The Basque Country has suffered terrorism for 60 years. And we come back to the discussion at the very beginning with imposing so-called virtue by terror. The Basques have suffered for 60 years the terrorism of ETA. And this has consequences, all kinds of consequences. And you have a society which is used to not reacting because of fear. So the most radical excesses can happen there, and you will have less reaction. Of course, another matter that we can delve into if necessary is what are the authorities doing? Because this is the reaction from society, but what about authorities?
So what I find very interesting, and this is something I've been thinking about for years, is that the two countries that are the most woke, the two countries that have the greatest excess that's officially sanctioned, is Ireland and Spain. I mean, they stand out. We have problems in other parts as well, but Spain and to some extent Ireland have gone way beyond where other countries have gone. And you got to ask the question why there is this spiritual malaise in these societies. Because what's interesting about both Ireland and Spain is that it happens so fast. I just remember, you wake up one morning, you go to a cinema and watch a Spanish film, and it's going to have naked bodies in there. It's going to be much more exhibitionist than the norm. And this is in staid old Catholic Spain. So the question becomes, why is that? And I think that what Miguel is hinting at is really quite important, because once your tradition, and that tradition was seen as being really hardcore at one time, once that tradition loses its influence, it unravels, then the limits of action, of where the boundaries are, also go. And therefore, transgression of all sorts is much more normalized in these two countries than is the case, anywhere else. I'm not saying it's good news in other parts of Europe, but in these two countries really, really stand out. And I think for that reason, there's a really important job to be done, which is why I'm so glad that now there's a reaction against it. I mean, it's really good that walks exist and is able to act as a counterpoint to that. But it is something that, when I think of the Spanish government and how immoral and corrupt they are, it does bother me that they are still managing to carry on and still managing to be the good boys of the European Union, who are loved by the various journalists as the fine exemplars of woke thinking and woke culture.
Yes, I would just like to add that this has happened by no coincidence. When the socialists first got to power in Spain in 1982, the then deputy prime minister, said in a very vulgar way, typical socialist way, he said that Spain would not be recognizable anymore. So there was a clear will to transform Spain. Now, in the Basque countries, there are certain conditions where an alliance between the supposed center-right and the socialism has taken place for decades, because both have something to gain with that alliance. And of course, this has been particularly effective there.
Okay, well, we look forward to catching up, and we should probably have you in to talk more specifically about what's going on in Spain and the success that we hope Vox are going to enjoy. Miguel, we should have you back to talk about that some more. But that's it for us now on the MCC Brussels podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please do like and subscribe and share the podcast. As I say, we know that there's an effect from recent regulations introduced by the European Union on all kinds of political speech online. We've spoken at length about the Digital Services Act. So if you do enjoy what we're doing, make sure you spread the word to your friends. Give us a like and a comment. Make sure we get around the algorithmic manipulation that we know takes place. But for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week on the MCC Brussels podcast.